Hi, and welcome to the Teacher Support Podcast brought to you by New Teacher University. And I'm so excited that you all are joining us for season three. In season three, we are rebranding and relaunching our podcast. Initially, we said it was for new teachers, but what we found out is that all teachers was listening to the podcast, including administrators. And I am your host, Dr. Terry Ross, and I'm also your principal here at New Teacher University. So I'm glad that you all are here with us this season because we know that all of our teachers need strategies that they can take and go into the classroom and use immediately. Also, this podcast is again, it's for administrators because we believe at New Teacher University that teachers are leaders and leaders are teachers. And leaders, if you're not teaching your people, you're not making sure that they get the best that you have to offer. So let's make sure that as leaders, we're constantly filling our toolbox so that we can help fill the toolbox of our teachers because that helps take away the stress and anxiety for what do I do next. So when you're walking around doing observations, you can have a strategy to offer them instead of just feedback. And today, I'm so excited to have with me Dr. Joan Jackson, CEO of From Me to You Consulting, where they develop partnerships between schools and businesses. And Dr. Jackson is going to tell us about her business in just a little while. But what I'm even more so excited about today, although her company is about developing partnerships, she's also an educator.
Mhm.
And today she's going to share with us a strategy around claim, evidence, and reasoning. Because we know that when Common Core first hit, one of the things they talked about is evidence, evidence, evidence. And
Mhm.
today we're going to talk about claim, evidence, and reasoning, which is a content area strategy, a content area literacy strategy that you can use in any subject area, but today is going to be grounded in writing. So, Dr. Jackson, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you to talk about your company, first of all, and then we're going to get into the strategy. So, tell us who you are, why did you start From Me to You Consulting, and what do you all do?
Well, thank you so very much, Dr. Ross. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I thank you for the opportunity. From Me to You Consulting works with schools and businesses to form mission-driven partnerships. So basically, I work with them as a consultant to look at how do they align their mission? Do their values line up? And what does that mean to impact the learning of the schools? As a community school coordinator, one thing I have learned over the years is that not everybody is trained in getting the right partnership. And
Yeah.
somehow down the road, the partnerships seem to fall apart. And that's because they did not have or take the time to make sure that their mission and visions were aligned. Now, as we talked about earlier today with this strategy, as a part of the community school process, we are charged to be a part of or have an impact in instruction. And as a part of the leadership team, my school found that we really weren't doing a good job with claim, evidence, and reason. As you know, that all of the core content has to have some kind of element that they are having the kids justify how do they arrive at this answer or what is there or to explain their thinking, right?
Absolutely. But
So
Dr. John, before we go into the strategy, I like what you said about if the partnerships are not aligned with the mission and the vision of the school. Is that me? Dr. Jackson, before we go any further, let's talk about your business From Me to You Consulting, because
okay.
it is so important that when you have partners in the school, that they are aligned with where you're going. Now, I always felt as a principal that if you wanted to partner with my school, and your values were aligned, we can figure out a way how to align you in the partnership. So tell us a little bit about how do you help schools uh, align the vision and mission with the partners, and what type of work, what does that look like when you're working with schools?
When I work with schools and partners, I look at actually sitting down and pulling out the document. What does your mission say? And let's compare it to your mission. And somehow there's got to be a common element.
Yeah.
Either we're about growth, either we're about outcomes, or that we're about the community. And I think when you're talking about schools, you want to make sure that you're working with a partner who is about the business of growing the community. It's not just a money grab, or it's not just a a way for them to get their name on a billboard, right? You
Absolutely.
want them to be a part of your community. So I look at doing a dissection of, let's go down and talk about the mission. What does this mission look like? How is it that, what can you both do to align to meet a common ground? And then we look at the vision. If the outcome is we're going to grow kids who can be college and career ready, that's the school's mission. How can that business help you reach that vision or address that vision? And then one of the other things I think is very critical when you look at partnerships, not only is the partnership supposed to assist you as a school in meeting and addressing the mission and the vision, but that partnership should also be vested in your learning outcomes. So when you have a school improvement plan, you need to share that school improvement plan with your partner, because there's no need in having an after-school program and they're not addressing the needs and the goals of your school. So they need to understand where the data just equally as much as your staff does. Because after all, hopefully that partnership is impacting and improving one of your outcome goals. And so that's where that alignment has to come in. Are we doing the practice and doing the work that not only benefits our mission and vision, but also gets us to meeting those goals in which we set up as a learning community?
This is so awesome, because the worst thing that you want to do is have a partnership and you're receiving funds from them, but they don't feel like they're making an impact somewhere in your mission and vision. So thank you for the work that you're doing to
And
align schools with partnerships. And they can contact you at from Mean to You Consulting. The information will be at the end of this podcast so that you can contact Dr. Joan Jackson, and she can tell you about the work that she can help you do with that. And it reminds me of when I was an elementary school principal. We have an IRS unit down the street from our school when I was an elementary principal, and they would come by and give out Christmas gifts. And one year they came by and we rolled out the red carpet, and they just fell in love with our children. And they said,
mm,
we want to do something more.
mm,
And we wanted, and I wanted them to do something more. And so what I did was, every 2 weeks they would send a few people out to teach our students a math strategy. I thought IRS deal with numbers. They can help, certainly they can help elementary children with math strategies. So they would come by every other week and do some math strategies with just a few students in the class, and those students were the leaders. And then those students would go back to the class and
mhm,
teach those strategies to the rest of the students.
mhm.
And it was so awesome. And actually, that year, our math scores just really took off, because we had students teaching students a
Yes,
strategy that they would have to use. And that strategy actually came from our curriculum. So thank you for sharing that, because, again, you do not want partners in your building and they feel like it's just a money grab and they're not being impactful in your mission and vision. And then, most of all, helping students reach their highest potential. So
yes,
now let's get into claim, evidence, and reasoning, and because that's the most important part that you can do in partnering with the school, is making sure that you help increase student achievement.
correct. So in my school this year, like I said, we found that across the board, even when the students had to explain their answers in math and in science, they were not really doing well or performing well in that area of claim, evidence, and reason. So we went through the standards and said, this is what our tier one topic is going to be for this year. So I worked with the instructional lead teachers to develop and design some training on claim, evidence, and reason. And basically, you use it in argumentative writing or persuasive writing. You have a claim. The claim is basically, what is the author's position? What is his point, or what is the main statement that he is trying to make? There are different kinds of claims. I don't know the levels of this people that this podcast goes to, but there are 4 basic types of claims. And so with that in mind, you might want to teach that, because especially if you are in social studies or in science, those other levels of claims, or those levels of claims, might be something you might want to have the children or the students prove. But for the basic state kids, you can decide what you want to do.
Can you share some of those levels with us?
Sure. So those levels are, the first is a claim of definition. So a claim of definition is a chair is what it is. You know, it is what it is, or this is something that we know is a settled fact. So an example might be what some people refer to as global warming is actually nothing more than long-term cycles of climate change. Well, climate change is a part of global warming. So that is a definition. So we just restate it as a definition as to what we can prove. The other type of claim is a claim of cause and effect. Again, this happens, and then this is the result of what happens. You know, this is the result. So one thing causes another. So for example, an example of that would be the popularity of the SUV in America has increased the air population. So the cause is because we have SUVs, the effect is now we got air pollution. And so the student would then develop that concept. The third kind is a claim of value. And this is where you get into also a testing strategy, because you use those little qualifying words like the most or very or likely, because those words are the qualifying that adds the value. Again, here is where that little claim of value gets a little tricky, because what's of value to me may not be of value to you. So you have to prove your point. So an example of that would be global warming is the most pressing challenge facing the world today. Well, it might be a pressing challenge to me, but it may not be for you. So for me, I have to prove that as the most pressing problem. And the last kind of claim is a claim of policy. A claim of policy argues for or against a certain solution or policy, and then it calls you to action, right? It's like, we're going to say this, but you need to act on it. So an example of that would be, instead of drilling for oil in Alaska, we should be focusing on ways to reduce oil consumption, such as researching renewable energy sources. So the policy is stop drilling. And then here is the solution. Here is the call to action. Go do some research. You know, so those kinds of four claims are the four basic claims of argumentative writing. And
Thank
then
you so much for sharing that. That is awesome. You were about to say something else about the
I was
claims?
going to go into, with each of those, you develop the reason, but the kids, when you do the reasons for each of those, you then need to make sure that the kids understand that those reasons have to come from not only their own brain, but it's something that's been already established by the author.
Yes.
And then that's when you cite the evidence for the citations.
Oh, you're speaking my language, because I love literacy. So let's go with the reasoning. Let's go.
Okay.
Yes, let's go with the
So with each of those, you know, the one thing that's really difficult for students to understand is that even though they might know the claim, trying to find the evidence, and not just
yes.
any old evidence, they need to have specific evidence or reasons. What is the reason that the author gives? And it has to come from the text. He says, you know, let's go back to the one we talk about, the SUV. If there is a line in the text that says something about 30% of the city of Los Angeles saw 30% increase in smog in 6 months. Well, that's a piece of evidence to support that.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to be specific. And we found that sometimes students haven't been trained. We haven't taken the time in the classroom to really have them understand what is relevant evidence.
Yes.
So actually modeling and walking through and doing some guided instruction on what does that look like does wonders.
Yes.
And then it also allows you the opportunity to do some check for understanding, member checking, to make sure everybody's on the same page. There's not a right way or wrong way, but at least even if there's a difference in gathering the evidence. It could be that group one has a different example, group two might have another example, but as long as the evidence or the text is relevant, that is the key to supporting that claim. And then the last part is you've got the evidence, but the evidence has to be cited. And we have to teach our children how to do some type of citation. At some point, it depends on the institution where I'm from, we do APA. Some schools do MLA, some people do something else. So as long as you're consistent within your building, I find that in my building, we have some folks who are doing a little bit of everything. So we've gotten to the point this year that everybody does MLA. And
Yes.
we had to actually just teach everybody MLA because it was very confusing because it was hodgepodge all over the place. So I think if you can get them to your building to practice one standard form of citation and the proper citation with down to punctuation and quotation marks, that basically solves the problem for the students to understand how to do their writing with their evidence and citations.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, because if it's uniformed across the building now, if they're writing in ELA, if they're writing in social studies, if they're writing in science, it's going to, you can't use MLA in science, can you?
Probably
Maybe
not.
at the
But
elementary level, maybe.
Yeah, we did. We're middle school.
Middle, yes,
So, but we made sure that everybody practiced the same standard and same
absolutely.
format, because that way it was very transferable across the curriculum.
Absolutely. And you said something else that I want to highlight, because it's very difficult. When we were in school, you could find credible evidence because you went to the encyclopedia.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have the internet or the gram or whatever they want to call it. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, people think they can pull sources from anywhere and it's credible. What do you do to help your students understand what credible evidence look like and what they should do to make that happen?
One thing that we try to do is actually look at the source and
Yes.
start directly with the source. I mean, it's one thing that you're on Instagram and you're doing that, but it's another thing when you're on CNN, right?
Yeah.
Where you know that, you can, it's a thing called credibility. Is this source credible? Can
Yes.
you find this information somewhere else?
Yes.
And so, for example, if I'm on Instagram, I might be able to find this TikTok that talks about, Project 2025. But is the information that this TikTok giving me exactly what I'm going to find when I open up the document? Or has it been modified? Or is it somebody's opinion? Whereas if I'm going to CNN and I find this information, am I going to hear it somewhere else? Am I going to see it on Channel 5 at my local newspaper? Am I going to see it in my newspaper? Am I going to see it, on Channel CBS, or even in the New York Times? If it's going to be a credible source, then that information is probably something that you can use.
Thank you so much for that, because that's one of the things we have to make sure that our students understand is a credible source, not just for school, but even for life, so that they can know how to move through life properly and using information. So because you have students, and one thing I worked with my daughter on, she would order things and I'd say, well, did you do the research on this? Did you properly research this? Don't put that on your skin, or don't put that in your hair until you know exactly what you're using and looking at the ingredients in it, but making sure that just because we bought it on Amazon does
Mm-hmm.
not mean that it came from a credible company. And that's something
Okay.
that we really have to look for these days. But even with credible companies, what are the ingredients? Because
Mm-hmm.
now ingredients are coded under other names
Yeah.
that we think that we may be doing something sugar free. And literally it is sugar free. However, the sugar is just hidden under another name.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So thank you for that. So now we're getting ready to move into reasoning.
So again, we talked about reasoning, but evidence again, the reasoning is they have to be able to explain. And
Yes.
you've got to explain how this piece of text deals with the claim. So again, I'm going to go back to 30% of, city of Los Angeles increased 30% in smog. Well, my rationale would be because there were more cars, who were that became SUVs, or there were more SUVs bought, then of course the air pollution went up. I mean, I'm just making this up the fly, so I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
But again, they have to have a logical reason why they're thinking that this is a credible source or this is a credible piece of evidence. Explain it. Give me the reason why you think that this explains not only that evidence that you found, but also that it's connected. It has to be connected to the claim. You just can't say it willy-nilly. It also has to go back to the claim. How does this evidence, along with your reason, support the claim? And if you can get those hooks together, then you've made a very good argument.
That's awesome. So now can you give us just a straight through claim, evidence, and reasoning example?
Okay, I'm going to use the same one. So I'm going to go back to the claim of, I think I did the cause and effect.
Yes.
The popularity of the SUV in America has increased air pollution. The city of Los Angeles found that air pollution increased by 30%. The air pollution increased because more people bought SUVs within a 6-month period in the city of Los Angeles, period.
Thank you so much. That's it. Claim, evidence, and reasoning. That is so awesome. You know, you could come to help me align my partnerships any day in any school that I'm in. And that's so awesome that they have someone like you that can come out and make that happen with your company from Me to You Consulting. Because it's important that when we're working to build partnerships, that those partnerships are meaningful.
Yes.
You don't want volunteers in your building and they feel like they're not making an impact. That's when our partnerships fall off, and we'll have all of these names on the bulletin board or the billboard or on the scoreboard, but there's no impact and no action behind it. And with having someone like you, Dr. Joan, that it would really help schools that when they're putting those partnerships together, that they can dig down and find out where can this company help us make an impact in our building. So thank you so much for joining us today. Is it anything else that you'd like to share about claim, evidence, and reasoning?
Well, I would just say, just make sure that you're practicing it across the board. You can do claim, evidence, and reasoning in family consumer science. You can do it in music and art. So if you're an arts integration school, this works very well with doing the instruction in the writing components within your classrooms. So I'm more than happy to reach out and assist anybody who needs any help. And again, I thank you so much, Dr. Ross, for your time today. And thank you for allowing me to share this small little tidbit with your listeners today.
Absolutely. And will you share some encouragement for our teachers as we start the school year this year?
I'm going to back up and say I'm on medical leave right now. And so the one thing I've learned is take care of yourself.
Yes.
Give yourself some grace. We talk about being Superwoman, Superman. We're not. Take some time. If you need to rest, rest. But know that your health is more important and you come first. So I would say start the year refreshed, hopefully starting the year. But as the year goes on, if you need to take those mental health days or those health wellness days, take care of you and your family and your friends and your students will deeply appreciate that.
Absolutely. When we're more connected, when we're well, then our students are well because we can show up whole.
Yes.
And thank you for sharing that. Yes, use those sick days. Use those vacation days. Do not try to save them to the end. I've seen so many administrators and so many teachers that saving those sick days and they never get a chance to use them. And that's what this podcast is about. It's about making sure that our teachers show up whole, that our teachers show up well, and that wellness piece starts from the top. It's so
Yeah.
important that administrators, that we know as administrators, as principals, assistant principals, people on the school leadership team, that look at your people, help them regulate. If you see that they're dragging or something like that, don't shove test scores down their throat. Say, hey, do you need to take a day off? Do you need to leave early? Help them make that doctor's appointment, because it is so important that our teachers are well, so that our children will be well. And because we know that our children are our future, then the future of this country is well in their hands. So thank you again, Dr. Joan Jackson
Thank
from Me
you.
to You Consulting, for joining us today here on the Teacher Support Podcast. We are in season 3, and we are relaunching and rebranding. And so we're excited to have you with us. And always remember that every day some child comes to school for you. And it's our job to just stand in the gap, because they don't know that they're coming for themselves. They think they're coming because they love their teacher. But when they're there, we want you whole and we want you well, so that you can teach them and help make them better. So again, thank you for joining us on the Teacher Support Podcast. I'm your host and principal, Dr. Terry Ross.